You're watching ASOTUCon 2024, presented in collaboration with Reynolds and Gubagoo.
Thanks to our studio partner, Automotive Mastermind, and our panel partner, Smart Wolf Consulting, for making this panel happen.
All right, y'all. Well, hello and welcome to our panel discussion on how to stop losing trades that you should be winning. My name is Joe Overby. I'm a senior editor of Auto Remarketing Magazine and part of the team at Cherokee Media Group. And with us here today, we have Todd Caputo, who is president of Todd Caputo Consulting. Here he's got a tough boss. We have Tony Lucas, who is currently the general manager at Casa Autoplex. And we have Daryl Steed, who is the president of Smart Wolf Consulting. Gentlemen, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Well, a reminder to our folks here that if you want to ask a question, you can go and do so through the app or just shout it out loud and we'll answer it. But we'll start at the top here. And Tony, we'll start with you. And gentlemen, if you want to chime in as well. When a customer comes into the dealership or goes to a dealer website with a trade, what are some first steps? A dealer says, or the customer says, I have a trade in. What are some first steps you take with them?
Yeah, I'm going to take a little different perspective here that probably most would expect on an answer like this because, there are steps that a salesperson will take or will take on the website with transparency and, the whole appraisal process and all this stuff. But just take a step back, and that's what I started when I was the used car director for the platform, a platform used car director. I started realizing that a customer having a trade, you're kind of not really exciting for a salesperson. Think about this, right? Like a salesperson up a customer or figures out that there's a trade. The first thing that they think about in their head is, oh man, it's probably upside down. One more thing to do. My manager's probably going to try to rip it, and it's just going to take more time. The exciting car deal for a salesperson is, hey, I'm an 800 credit score, and I don't have no trade. I already saw the car online. I'm here to pick it up, and I'm going to do it. So the first step, the true first step on a successful used car operation, in my opinion, and will be create a culture where your salespeople truly understand the value of a trade-in and how it will benefit them the next day to sell the vehicle, right? But that's been my first step, and in any store that I walk in any of the acquisitions that we had, it was create a trade-in acquisition culture where all the individuals are excited about having a trade because I saw that as being like, oh, you do have a trade, okay, let me grab my phone and go out there and take some pictures and stuff. So that's the first step I have taken as an operation standpoint. That's kind of the perspective I want to take here because, we can talk about all the steps that it is on appraisal and things like this, but I guarantee you continue to struggle with trade appraisals and with that process if you don't have a sales team that really believes that a trade-in, it's a blessing, it's a good thing, right? So.
Yeah, attitude changes a lot of things, doesn't it? Well, so when you are trying to figure out what the trade is worth, what are some steps, best practices for evaluating a trade? And Daryl, we'll start with you, and guys, if you want to chime in as well.
Yeah, so when evaluating trading, and I'll obviously echo what Tony is that can they evaluate it? Like, you need to give them a tool that doesn't stop in the process. I don't need to go find someone to get a value to start the conversation. So a lot of the stores that I consult with, I'm a big component of AccuTrade because it allows that process to keep moving forward. But when you're evaluating is, where are you giving them a number? Where is it coming from? And I think dealers get really caught up. I mean, not that there's any egomaniacs that are dealers that think they can do it all like we heard next door. I've been doing this a long time. I know what I'm doing is, where's this value come from? Is it data-driven? Is it thought-driven? Is it I think? So you have to give a third-party validation because I say this, a lot of people laugh. You guys don't have to if you don't want to, but have you ever told anybody that a mom that had a baby, their baby's ugly?
No, that's
no, because you
dangerous.
wouldn't be here. So why do you want to go tell them their trade is terrible or give them the first number and knowing there's going to be a problem? You use third-party validation so that when they see that number, we already know it's too low in their mind. You could tell them retail, and it's still going to be too low. Once you give them that number, now we have a conversation of what can you do for them, what's in it for them, and then we can figure out what strategy because each store is different, works for where we go from that point. But you need a baseline of accurate data or a value that uses actual data in the market, not feelings and thoughts.
Todd, what are some best practices you would share with the dealer, and maybe what are some like metrics they should look at when evaluating a trade?
So first of all, if you're a dealer, you actually have to have a process for trade appraisals in your store, number one, and it needs to be written and it needs to be scalable so everybody understands it. That's number one. Number two, you have to decide as a dealer with your process, is the salesperson going to be a part of the appraisal process with the customer? Is the customer going to even be a part of the appraisal process or not? Because some dealerships basically, okay, Mr. and Mrs. Jones, give me your keys, and it goes off to some guy or girl in some office, some glass office somewhere. Don't know who they are. It's this mystery person that just takes their keys and goes. I'm a proponent that it should be done with the salesperson and the customer together. They should have some kind of process that they go through every single time. The salesperson should be responsible with the customer alongside of them to do the cosmetic portion of the inspection, right? And the mechanical part, not necessarily mechanical, but the drivability part of the appraisal process is typically done by a used car manager, sales manager, a GSM. So when I work with stores or I talk about this subject, those are one of the key things that I talk about, those things first. I'm a proponent, again, of as much transparency in the dealership, the better. If you have the customer involved in the process, they feel like they have control. And also, too, it's a good opportunity for the salesperson to plant the seed for F&I products as well if you're selling those kind of F&I products in your store. So.
Well, Tony, what are some of when you're, on the ground evaluating a trade that comes in or someone on your staff is, what are some of the metrics that, all the numbers that come to you, what are some of the metrics that you guys watch for, whether it's day supply of that car, weekly wholesale prices, et cetera?
Yeah, we're trying to get as accurate as we can and looking at a number of things. And I spend a lot of time training as salespeople and sales manager and to be able to look at these metrics, but market day supply. Now, with some tools like AccuraTrade and LotPop, we're looking at metrics that are a little, like, even in my opinion, a little step ahead of most, because a lot of people, a lot of dealers do trade appraisals looking at, if not looking at any database, any data at all, but sometimes looking at the wrong ones, like market data that really doesn't concern them, right? Like knowing how ratio and miles and things like this and competitive sets and how to build a competitive set is important, but also looking at history of how we do with that specific car in our lot. How historically, how well we sold this vehicle here, that color, that miles, internal historically data, it's important to me.
Joel, let me add a couple things too. So I think it's important, number one, to determine the disposition. Is it going to be a car you're going to retail, or if it's going to be a car you're going to wholesale? If it's a car you're going to wholesale, typically cost to market, price to market doesn't really make much difference. It's really auction data more than anything else, and maybe some books too, but really auction data for the most part, especially with the volatile used car market we're in. You can't look at a car, what it brought a month or two ago. You need to look at what it brought maybe a week or two ago at the auction to really get a good value if it's a wholesale car. If it's a retail car, having someone, as accurately as possible estimate the reconditioning dollar amount is extremely, extremely important, right? Because if that gets messed up, it can mess up your cost to market, it can mess up your price to market. So like knowing that and then actually tracking it. So I use vAuto as an example, right? What they do is everybody with vAuto, they put in their average dollar RO, call it $1,400-$1,500, whatever is in your shop, but that's about the average. And then they track the actual dollar amount in reconditioning versus what you estimated. And they track it by appraiser, which is really smart. That's what I recommend to my clients. It's super, super important because you can either overpraise a car or underpraise a car. But if you're way off all the time on reconditioning, it can help you make the right deals and also help you make the wrong deals and put too much money in a trade. So it's super, super important.
So so they would track like each appraiser at a dealership, like saying, okay, Todd over here appraises it for X amount, and so you can kind of see And that could, I imagine too, could help in coaching some of the employees. Of the
Yeah,
dealership.
it's super helpful. Not only that, another best practice too, in my opinion, is to make sure that you identify the source every single time, whether it's an off-street purchase, a lease turn-in, a new car trade, a used car trade, service drive, KBB, ICO, whatever, right? So you can actually determine look to book by source. So when you look at what you're spending in advertising to drive traffic in, whether it's consumer acquisition or just buying their car or a trade-in, or if you do a mailer or whatever, tracking look to book by source, by appraiser is super, super important. Really dial that in.
Can I add a couple things on look to book, because I do live in that world a whole lot, to manage appraisers and things like this. But I've been the dealer that says, man, we have to be at least 40% look to book on trades, no matter what. And recently I have rethink this a little bit, and along the thought of, if a metric becomes a target, ceases to be a good metric, right? I will be okay with having a 20% look to book on trades if I'm trading for more cars, right? It doesn't matter if you can get a 60% look on trades, but if you're not looking at them too many trades and taking less, too many appraisals and take less trades in, it's not beneficial to me. So.
Yeah, so I was going to say, so vAuto, I mean, a lot of people have it. They've that's like the industry standard. And they'll even tell you it's good data in, bad data in, right? It's what you put in. So I look at a very challenging way of losing trades. Do you put every trade appraisal that comes across your lot? So every service drive, every sight unseen, we only don't have the VIN, year, make, and model. Well, if you don't do that, all your numbers are wrong anyway. Because you don't have a real look to book, because now you're conditioning yourself to what you've been told is industry standard, but you're not putting everything in. So if you put everything in and then you get to the 20s or 30s, you're killing it, because it's every car that came across your lot you put in there and you hang a number on it. Now you know what you had the opportunity to take in. Whether you did or not, you know where you're missing or what you need to step on. Two, when you're talking about losing trades, is that you want to coach people, and this is just my opinion, it's been very successful so far, but sales managers, okay, if you use a tool, I think tools are great that have data drivers behind them. But once it comes to, if you're going to pay more in a car, there should only be one person in your store that can do that. Could you imagine being in his Autoplex or in 5 stores and you have 30 different people that can increase the trade value? So you have 30 opinions of how they got there.
Too many cooks in the kitchen.
So now I need to change it. We're paying too much for trades, or I'm doing that. If I have one person that isn't part of the sales process, that looks at that data, makes database decisions, no emotion, I can tweak that in a moment. I don't have to go sell 30 people on how I got there, or why are you looking at book or MMR or any other nonsensical thing that they justify their position. And I just had a GSM from 25 years ago. He built the market to what made his case. Because you can change our book and say, I want to take this out and add this in and do this and do that. And look, now it's a 30 days. Well, yeah, if I take everything out that's relevant. But if it's just the data and no one's involved in sales that says, okay, you need more money, you get a call or and it's well, now you're controlling the variable, which then protects the gross, and then you use the documentation for negotiation. If you have the tool, we have the tools and we don't want to use them, it's because typically it starts at the top, is we don't hold that standard from the top down of, we paid for these tools to put us in a better position, but we don't want to hold our managers to that accountability, right? It starts at the top and works its way down. We did this in 4 clients that I have, change it to a centralized appraising type of model, one number, 400% increase in one store, 300, because now it was you had to go and have the conversation of how you came to that number with third-party validation. And if someone needs more money, I don't look at, it takes $5,000 to make the deal or $4,000. The max that this car transacts at is this, whether it's wholesale or retail, right? Like Todd said, if it goes wholesale, well, now you don't look at cost of money. Now it's a different strategy. But if it's retail, I'm not paying $5,000 more because that's what it takes to make a deal. You're going to need to either go sell it, lower the price of what you're selling, because that trade is one of one. You only get to stand on the hood when you take it in. And if you keep overpaying for it, then you're standing on the hood to lose money. It's evolutionary to what it does, right?
Top. Joe, I want to add something too. So there's a lot of appraisals that get done by dealerships without people actually even knowing it. And those are the instant cash offers that are put out by all these different software vendors that every dealer has in their website. All the dealers that I work with, and when I speak on this, when I go do dealer roundtables, I strongly recommend that if you're a dealer in the room, that you actually shop your instant cash offer tool on your website, and you do it often, right? You can adjust the algorithms to how aggressive or non-aggressive you want to be on certain years, certain makes, certain models, trims, mileage, condition, because if you're a Hyundai dealer, for example, like my friend Andrew here, I would assume that he's going to be extremely aggressive on a Hyundai, where he may not want to be on an off-brand that he doesn't do well with, retail. And on the flip side, you also want to do the same thing with your competition too, because if you look at the missed trade report in Viat or any other data, when you see how you're missing deals, a lot of times they're to your competitors, and it's for the same make that you sell, the same franchise that you own. So it's super important to look at it all the time and to work with that vendor to tweak the algorithms to be as aggressive or non-aggressive, depending on where you stand. And you get hundreds. People will copy and paste their VIN and shotgun it to multiple websites, to multiple dealers, especially if they want to sell their car. They'll do it to Carvana, they'll do it to CarMax, whoever, right? And they're going to go with whoever gives them the most amount of money for the most part. I mean, I did it with my son's vehicle about a month ago. I live in Charlotte. He's got a Toyota 4Runner, and I wanted to see, I was doing a little experiment. I got between $37,000 from one dealer who was a Toyota dealer to almost $42,000 from another. And I did it with 4 dealers, and all I did was shotgun the VIN. It happens all the time. So, like, if you're a dealer, like, really keep that in mind.
Were all those dealers in the Charlotte area?
Yeah, they were all in the Charlotte area. Yeah.
That's interesting because you would think they all had the same access to the same data. So you guys each have kind of touched on the software side of it. What are some other, beyond software and things that can kind of track market data, what are some of the other technologies that can help with, for lack of a better word, some of the physical tasks of actually evaluating a vehicle?
So there's software out there now that will help whoever's responsible for the cosmetic part of the inspection do it properly. It'll walk them to each panel. There's some AI out there now that helps detect damage on the car that may or may not be seen, which is helpful. And it also kind of makes the salesperson like the neutral party if the software's doing it. Then you're not picking apart somebody's ugly baby, like you mentioned, right? And obviously there's all kinds of tools that, there's paint meters. I always recommend to my clients use a tire gauge, like a real simple tire gauge to measure the tires, show the customer, because tires cost money. And obviously some dealers will or will not use an OBD2 and plug it in and see if there's any codes. And another thing that I always speak about also is the future of these trades, EVs, battery life. Is it full self-driving? Is it only partial full self-driving? What level is it? Subscription options. I mean, eventually a lot of these manufacturers have talked about, maybe you only want to pay for heated seats in the winter and then not have them in the summer. Well, if you go to trade your car in February and you press the button, it turns on, but when the customer trades it in, the feature's turned off, and it's not really an ad because it's a subscription thing. So I think that those are things that are important too.
Yeah, I was going to add, so like an OBD2, because you bring up EVs, which is, the buzzword of the nation right now. Like, do you want to mess with them? Do you not want to mess with this? On an OBD2, you invest to get that, which is great, but there is an extension to that tool that plugs into the EV to test battery life and things of that nature. No one gets it because they just like, oh, it's an EV, we don't need to do it. Well, when you plug that USB port into it does the same thing to see, is it degenerated? Do you have a battery issue? Because if they don't charge, much like, let's say, the old Nissan Leaf, after about 5 years, that might get 20 miles to the charge, is you need to know where that battery life is, because that is a sellability thing for you to, especially if you're a franchise store, what you're backing, because you don't want to create customer service issues. The other thing is, how simple is it if you're going to have salespeople do it, or centralized appraising, or one person doing it, whatever the bandwidth is for your store, how simple is the process, and do you make it to where the salesperson understands why you do it? Because, yes, if you talk to Brian Kramer, you can do one in 2 minutes, not with an OBD reader or pictures. But if you're going to require all that, and it takes 15 minutes, do your salespeople, it's got to be simple and it's got to be quick enough that they get the stuff you need, but it doesn't, with the customer, you're not elongating the process, because it's an enhancement to what you're giving the customer, not like, oh, here we go, and it's going to take 45 minutes to do this. So when I train stores, the first thing I do is secret shopping is like CarMax. They're great. They know what they do. I don't know about the East Coast, but Midwest to West Coast, you're never getting out of there under 90 minutes. And there's a whole reason why they do that. Well, okay, do you make it faster? Is it easier? Is it because you don't want them to feel? So you need to know what your competitors are doing so that you deliver an experience better or more beneficial to the customers, the experience part of it. Value is going to come into the conversation, but the experience has to be something they feel like they're involved in or that there's fairness there. It can't feel like take it or leave it.
Tony, you were going to add something.
Yeah, no, I think they touch everything, but I'll just one more time endorse the OBD2. It's been something that I started using not too long ago. It's a great tool. It doesn't only help justifying some of these appraisals and some of these numbers, but also we've gone through some situations in the past. A couple of years ago, we bought 6 trucks, and all 6 of them end up to being stolen. It was devastating, and we're still fighting through that deal, and the insurance, it might cost us $600,000 worth of vehicles, and the OBD2 has helped us, prevent that now because these guys got so smart with this stuff now, very crafty to put a piece of paper that looks like the VIN number inside of the windshield that looks like it. If you glanced at it, like it's there, it looks the same, and the door, it's like a manufacturer sticker that they put it on. So it's kind of a dangerous things happening out there. The OBD2 has helped a lot.
Go ahead.
So I've seen UVI getting used now. I'm sure you probably heard of that product before. A lot of dealers are using that for appraisals, which is, I think, a good tool for a lot of reasons. And there's another vendor out there too it's called Sky Vision, SKAI Vision. I don't know if anybody's seen that, but what it allows you to do is put up a camera. A lot of dealers are putting in their service drive or putting it where the trade is. It reads the plate, it pings the DMS, pulls the latest odometer, and then what it'll do is help kick an instant offer process in your service drive, like automatically, to take the people part partially out of it so it gets done every single time. So if there's ways that you can make it more efficient for a customer when they come in or if they're in the service drive and you can have a thorough process in place. I mean, I know UVI is not cheap and these things aren't inexpensive, but I think if they're used properly, there's definitely ROI there.
Well, each of you guys have kind of touched on this a little bit, but kind of from a dealership level, Tony, when a customer comes in, what are some ways you communicate the value of their car to them? How do you overcome pushback if they say, hey, my car's worth more than that? What are some ways that you can help that conversation go more smoothly?
Man, that's a cool question, but this question been in every single conference that I've been going to for the past 10 years, right? Like it's been the same objection every single time. I don't suffer with that a whole lot though, because it becomes a whole process thing, right? A whole trust thing, a whole transparency thing from the beginning. Because the reality is now you can pick up your phone right now and you can get a value for your car very, very quickly from different people, Carvana, CarMax, and all those things. I think the right question is, am I putting the right number on this car where this customer feels very confident throughout the entire process? That's a competitive number, right? And what I see most of the time, it's not, right? We still, a lot of dealers still playing the game of like, man, let me try to rip this trade. Let me try to, I think that's the wrong way to go about it. I look at a whole lot of, we've been playing for 2 days now. Like, man, the answer of everything, sell more cars, right? It's like, man, we have problems with your marriage, sell more cars. Like, I mean, I don't know. Like, but it's funny, but at this perspective of, if you know how to retail cars better, you will put a very aggressive number on trades. Make sense? Like, if you know that you're the right end user for this vehicle and you can make money on this vehicle and you tracking your sales team a discount on cars and you training to justify the price on vehicles by market data and things like this, and you retailing at a high level, because a lot of people don't know this. The objection that a lot of people have out there, that I talk to a lot of used car managers all the time, is like, man, CarMax is kicking my butt. Every time they come in with the CarMax offer and it's like, I can't compete. It's because you're not retailing at a high level like CarMax is. Because the fact is CarMax right now has an average of $2,000 more on their price. They ask $2,000 more than the market. And they still selling cars. They're not collecting them and there's no discount. So they just doing a better job in retailing, therefore they can offer more money for the car. So I go to that place way more than it is, let me equip the salesperson with all these tricky ways to like justify me not putting the right money on the car. I live more in a place of, man, the entire experience needs to be transparent. It needs to be a real number. It needs to be an aggressive number, competitive number, and I need to know what to do with the car that they are trading for, right? Like the exit plan. So that's
I was going to add, like when Todd said it needs to be in writing, right? I think that's the big thing. Put it in writing, and then it's a process, which I've been talking to a couple people. Processes are not guidelines. We don't follow them because it's sunny today. Processes are black and white, so they are step-by-step processes. But like when you say CarMax, and I will give you guys an industry thing because I actually am on a 20 group with CarMax. Every number they give to a customer has $1,200 built into wholesale strategy. Every single number. So like the number they give, they have a buffer into that number. If they weren't going to keep it, it doesn't make their shop. So they're like, even when you see that number, you're like, oh, it's so high. There's a buffer behind that for them to be profitable. But when you're doing the trade process, whether it's you're walking the customer out there, you can get more aggressive if that is your guys' methodology because you are knowing what your store does. But if you have, whether it's AccuTrade or ICO or any of these tools that you can use, when you present that number, you have to be confident and train them in that conversation of like, here's how we came up with the number. If they're with you, they were part of the process. So there's no hiding. And then you just have to know where you're at as a store. Are you willing to pay more than that? Are you a take it or leave it? Do you give options? I'm always a component of give options. So if you have an AccuTrade and an ICO, show both those numbers. Double blind validation is better. Like as a dealer, I want to be the last person to give a number. I want someone else to give a number because KBB's been around for 97 years now. And you've got AccuTrade with Cars.com. And so they've got Brandon. And then you've got CarMax. Any of those things, is if they think that, I want $4,000 over that number, now we can have a conversation fairly with a customer of, where'd you come up with that? Mm-hmm. The moment they ask for more, they've opened up a conversation to then question them. But if you didn't give them anything presenting how you came up with your number, you do not get to defend it. So whether you show something that shows dents, dings, and scratches, or the ICO offer, or a trade pending review, or whatever you guys are using, you have to talk to it and not hide behind it and not go change a number because you didn't like what it was. If you're going to put a process in, you have to trust the process. You can't say, oops, today, or this customer. And like I told Tony, most GMs or most stores that struggle with this make everything the exception and nothing the process. This customer, it's different this time. It's always different. Every single time is 90% of the time, if you're doing it the exact same way, you can make an exception 10% of the time. Just don't make everything an exception.
Todd?
The only thing I'll add is, look at reality is most people already know what the car is worth before they walk in the door. They've done their homework, whether they got the number off of your website or 4 other dealers' websites or KBV or whoever. So they already pretty much have a good idea. Consumers are very educated. I'm very much a proponent of being transparent, and I don't think you should be bringing out MMR data and showing them auction data because they're not going to necessarily understand that. But any of the software out there that's used in a car dealership all has customer-facing UI to it somewhere where you can present it to them in an educated way, and for the most part, they already know where and what it is. I just advocate that a couple things. Number one, the appraisal process needs to be efficient but not rushed. Right? And a lot of times in a car dealership, it's rushed. And I used to do it when I owned stores. Sometimes you're working 2 or 3 deals at the same time. You walk out to a car with 10,000 miles on it. You just make sure that the air blows cold and you go back in. Should not be done that way. It should be done pretty much the same way every single time. Cosmetic, mechanical, because it makes the customer feel like you're doing it properly. You're not rushing them. Even if they're driving a car that's worth $500, you're still doing a thorough inspection, not making them feel bad. But back to what I said, they know for the most part anyways. That's why, especially with your website, if you're giving people instant cash offer numbers, that number is very, very, very strong and very, very aggressive. Because if it's not, you'll never see those people again. You can have all the BDC people in the world calling all these ICO leads, and you might be converting to 5% if you're lucky. But if you're giving people a really strong number, even if they show up at your store and you find something wrong with their car, because not every car is in excellent condition like every customer puts in the form. We know that. But you can still show them in a polite way that their car does have imperfections, and then maybe not give them the original offer, but somewhere in between that's fair and reasonable. And a lot of times you can either get the trade or buy the car from them.
I want to just add one thing when you said the be fast but efficient. And this will be like the one thing I would tell everybody and every dealer. So if you use four squares, I love them. I mean, I came from that methodology, but we've conditioned customers to fight us. And this is why. You give them a trade number, and let's say you're sticking them to the ceiling. We're going to go super old school. You put a Sharpie and okay, you win, and a smiley face and all that good stuff. 3 minutes later, that trade got more value. And then you went back, and 5 minutes later, magically, it's more money. You've conditioned them to say no to you. You've conditioned them to say, look, in 5 more times, this car will be worth $4,000 more. Is if you have something, you have 2 opportunities. The whatever customer UI that you're going to present, and one opportunity to, if you're going to beat that or be better. The moment you want to go back and play this game, you've lost all validity to why you did this, and it can't be done in 5 minutes. You cannot put a number out there. Hey, I'm going to go look at your car, and in 3 minutes you present a number. So you're telling me you did a thorough inspection on my car in 90 seconds, and you believe that I'm going to take that number. It's that weird pace of like that 10 to 15, maybe 20-minute mark of you're looking at the car, maybe take it for a quick touch. There has to be reasonable time that there was care points that you actually went and did what you said you were going to do so you can present a valid conversation of how you got there. If it takes me 3 minutes, you're going to be like this, okay. And then if your number, like when you secret shopped, is a $5,000 delta, now you're definitely not seeing the customer again.
Well, last question before we close here. Tony, given that you need to have some context, you need to take your time presenting a trade offer to a consumer, but you also want the process to go quickly, the shopping process. How do you balance that as a dealer?
I think this guy's already answered this. Having a process that's written, we don't move away from the process. Even the general manager, right? Like I have conversations like this all the time. For the sales manager just shoot me a text. Hey, you have a second? Yeah. Come to my office. I'm like, hey, this is a friend of mine. Yeah. This is a friend of mine. This and the other. I'm like, stick to the process 100% of the time. If it is my trade, if it is a friend, whatever, we'll stick to the process 100% of the time, and it just becomes very natural. It's just like. It's expected, and customers feel comfortable. We go through the process of finding out what the trade is worth or the acquisition, whatever it is. I never struggle with it because I stick with processes. So.
Very good. Well, guys, that's our time for today. Let's give these folks a round of applause. Thank you so much for being part of it.